As a charismatic, experiencing the presence of God was experiencing the Holy Spirit. So that means in the sanctuary, doing worship, I would open myself up to how the Holy Spirit would intuitively touch me. It was a physical feeling. And what prompted that was me saying words of adoration, typically chanting the Psalms, those type of things. Praise and worship was a big part of that experience. So through song, through worship, actually being silent, we had episodes of that where we practiced silence. And some very profound things would happen with that. People will, you would feel overwhelmed with God's presence. And so those are things that we experience. I experienced God. Also, too, in terms of prayer, when I would pray for a particular issue, God would answer prayers. So I would experience the presence of God through answered prayer. So very, very tangible, very tactile, very emotional type experiences, more than intellectual. These are things that I could experience and then share with other people. It was mind-boggling to discover this. I had no idea that Catholics over the centuries read the Psalms or other poetry type literature in the Bible and would sing it, chant it. That was mind-boggling to me, because within the charismatic movement, we would talk about reading the scriptures and spontaneously coming up with music to repeat certain phrases to the point where we would have that experience, and then to discover that during the monastic movement, scriptures was being placed as song, and it was just the voice. I remember some of the most powerful experiences I've had as a charismatic was just a cappella, no music, just singing, and then being silent. And at those moments, people just have phenomenal experiences. Like people will feel overwhelmed, or they'll have a vision, and things like that. And to discover that within the Catholic Church for centuries, that was a practice of profound silence and hearing the voice of God and responding to the voice of God. So that tied neatly into my charismatic experience. And again, reading about St. Anthony and other mystics that would be isolated in a particular place, and then they would sense the presence of God, or even spiritual warfare. They would sense evil, and they'll be tackled because there's just this heightened awareness. So that fit nicely in my experience as a charismatic, and discovering that was always been part of the Catholic Church's experience. I had a profound experience, and I think God providentially meets us where we are. Even if we're not where we need to be, God meets us. And so I had the experience that I was part of a praise and worship group. And I was a lead vocalist at that time. I also played keyboards. And we were just singing the Psalms, and we got really silent. And it was just a period of time, just worship and praise, and we got silent. And then all of a sudden, people just started falling in the auditorium. It kind of brought the hairs up on your arms. People were just collapsing and just started weeping. And at that moment, I believe I had a vision of angels. I just saw in the auditorium, I just saw these big angelic halo glowing beings all throughout the auditorium. And at that time, I practiced the gift of prophecy. I would just say, "Thus says the Lord," or I would give some word of encouragement, that was that experience, and that's always stuck with me. It gave me the sense that somehow God was breaking into my reality, and at the same time, people's needs were being met spiritually, and those type of things. In adoration, it's almost like the same type of thing. I remember one time I was in adoration, and I don't know what it is, looking at the Blessed Sacrament and just peering into that one, but I began to see that on the other side of that was eternity peering back at me. And it was just chilling for a moment, just to think that God is here. I know everybody has different thoughts about the real presence, but I believe the real presence, and I believe God is one. And for a moment, I began in my mind to see a chorus of heavenly beings celebrating on the other end of that. As I was looking at that, it's almost similar to my charismatic experience, that at this moment, I am joining in with the chorus of heavenly beings. And then I read about Father Fulton Sheen, and I believe he's blessed. Is he blessed at this point? talking about how important it was to have adoration being part of your life and spending an hour before the presence of God. And I thought there was only us charismatics that were experiencing silence, and to think that the Catholic Church, this was a very important part of their experience of just contemplating the presence of God. And so to me, that tied neatly into that experience, because I do personally believe that when I'm in adoration, I in my soul, I think I'm connecting with all the saints on the other end, through that portal, and that it's just a focus and a connection, and I'm looking into eternity. Right now it's a shade. Right now there's a veil, but I believe in my soul that I'm joining with all the saints in adoration, and God is even in that room because I'm focusing. I'm bringing up my intellect. So it's all there. I mean, there's times I just feel you could just lay down on the floor, before the presence of God. And if I could tie that also into the Eucharist, when the Eucharist is blessed and is held up, it's the same type of image. This is God. This is the Trinity right there, and that's something as charismatics we were longing for. We were longing for the presence of God, and I believe it's in the Eucharist. I believe it's in adoration.